Okay, welcome everyone. So this is a introductory class to the series of 6 classes that I'm teaching this summer. Usually the Feldenkrais series are somewhere between 6 and 10 weeks or 10 lessons long. And for this series of classes, we're going to explore movement and our skeleton through our own touch. So in some ways, it's a little bit of a beginner-oriented series, but for those of you who have a lot of experience with awareness through movement, you'll find, I think, plenty of material that will be really useful for your practice. But the intention of the series is to use the quality of touch and your hands to basically enhance your perception of some of the details that take place while you are moving. So the lessons will be fairly uncomplicated. We won't do too many complex variations, but we'll get into some of the details of how you actually sense the shape of your bones and the movement of some of your bones relative to others. Also, how you sense your quality of your muscle tone. So hopefully it will be really practical and informative to you, whether you have a Feldenkrais practice or not. So each lesson, we're going to look at kind of a particular area of the body or kind of hone in on a specific bone. And today we're going to be working with our chest. So we'll be working with our sternum and our clavicles. And I really debated whether or not to show you some images of the bones that we're going to be touching. Those of you that come to class, you know I very often show anatomy before the lesson, and I do find that it's really useful, especially for those of us that are visual learners. So the thing I just want to say before I show the image is that the images that you see, and probably any image that you've ever seen of a skeleton, is not your skeleton. And what I mean by that is most images of skeletons are proportioned in one way, and none of us are proportioned in that way. None of us are proportioned the same as each other. So I just want you to kind of take with a grain of salt the image. So take something from it that might be helpful. And then if you're feeling any kind of judgment towards the image of the skeleton in yourself, I don't think most of us compare our skeletons to each other's because we can't see our skeletons. So we probably don't think of them in that way. But, our minds are really interesting things, and they can, interesting thoughts can show up while we're in a lesson. So that's what I just want to say about the image before I show it. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. All right, so highlighted in blue is your clavicle, more commonly probably called the collarbone. And we're going to explore this bone quite a lot today. Your collarbone is part of your shoulder. So your shoulder is just a space where 3 bones kind of collect in that space. There's some, there's a joint capsule there, there's some tissue there, and of course, muscles and tendons and ligaments. So your collarbone goes all the way out and it meets your scapula. So your scapula is that long, or not long so much, but triangular shaped bone on your back. I'm going to move this over a little bit. And you can see that there's this kind of wing, this thing that sticks out of your scapula. Whenever a bone has some kind of protrusion like that, it means that that's a place where muscles attach. So muscles via tendons and ligaments are attaching there to the bone. So we'll explore that a little bit today, but I just wanted to kind of highlight that your collarbone goes all the way out towards the tip of the shoulder where your scapula is. And then in the front, the collarbone joins with your sternum. So this right here is a bunch of cartilage, a bunch of ligaments where your ribs kind of attach into your sternum. I'm going to hide these cartilage pieces, and just so that you can really see the shape of both the collarbone here and then your sternum, which has a top part called the manubrium, and then the body of the sternum. So the collarbones touch the sternum, don't touch, right? Because there's some space there, but there's a little joint between the collarbone and the manubrium. And so then interestingly, your first rib, It's not letting me. There we go. The first rib is right below and kind of underneath, wraps underneath that collarbone. So there's a lot happening here at this collarbone chest area. And, I think a lot of us feel tightness there, if the shoulders are hunched forward and things like that. So there's also quite a lot of soft tissue and muscles that this image isn't showing. So that's what I wanted to just fill your brain with before we do some movement. Okay, so let's actually start the lesson today in standing. So just come to stand. And it's fine if I can't see you, if you have your camera set up for me to see the mat that's on your floor or your rug, that's just fine. You can just leave it there. Okay, so as we begin, just actually turn yourself away from the screen. Just because our eyes are always so directed towards the screen, just kind of forget that there's a screen there as long as you can hear me. It's all good. So as we begin, just consider that for most of the day, you really don't touch yourself with your hands too much, except for maybe some basic activities like washing your hands or taking a shower. Maybe you're sitting and reading a book and the arms are resting against your body. But when you stand, normally you have your arms released down at your side. So do that if you aren't already. Just let your arms hang, let your hands be free. And for the moment, take some time to sense the weight of each of your arms. In other words, perceive in this moment the way you actually have the weight of the arms hanging from the shoulders and the way that the shoulder hangs from the spine. And just notice for you how each arm feels, whether one arm feels longer than the other to you, or if one arm feels tighter or compressed. Maybe the shape of your hand at the end of your arm is some indication of something. And then go ahead and just very simply, and I recommend you do it slower than you know how to do it, you're just going to bring one of your hands up to brush your hair over your ear. So as you do it, again, slower than you know how to do it, the hand is going to come up in some kind of an arc, and then your elbow starts to lift and your hand comes into contact with the skin or your hair. And you just really take a moment, relish in the way your fingers find the path over the top of the ear, comb through the hair, maybe brush over the scalp, and then you bring your hand, your arm back down to your side. And so you can do that. You can do that another time or two. And this whole experience of moving the arm is very basic. You might do this many times a day without realizing it. Yeah. And then let that arm come down and do the same thing with the other hand. But again, the instruction is to really go slower than you know how to do it. So it means to back way off of any kind of performative speed in the way that you lift your hand, because you want to feel some of the details about how the arm bends and if the shoulder feels like it's lubricated or does it brace a little bit as the arm starts to lift? Do you feel like the head and the neck, do they stay high and balanced as the hand approaches, or can you feel at some point the hand gets closer to the head and it's almost as if the head almost pulls a little downward towards the arm? Great, good, that's nice. Now go ahead and do the same thing with the initial arm, the first arm that you use. Simply listen to how the arm comes up, same thing. And as you do it, listen to the weight of your pelvis in space as the arm is coming up. See if you can actually observe whether your body shifts a little bit over your feet in any way as your arm comes up into the air. You could also observe that you really don't shift your weight at all. Like it feels like you have all the stability you need from your body, and the body is just absolutely stable where it is. Good. And then go ahead and bring the second hand, the other hand up to brush over the ear, taking your hair kind of up and behind the ear. And again, do it slow enough that you can really watch your body weight shift or not shift over your feet. And you might also notice whether your face actually turns a little bit to one side. Some people, they bring their hand up to brush the hair over the ear, and you might turn your face a little towards your hand, or you might actually turn the face away from the hand, almost like you're offering the ear to the hand, closing that distance. Good, good, very nice. The next time, just let that arm release all the way down and go ahead and walk around in your space a little bit. And as you're walking, could you allow the arms to not do anything special? So don't attempt to swing the arms more or do any kind of coordination with the arms. Just allow them to hang, release at your sides. And by doing that, notice the kind of balance you sense between the two shoulders, your head, your neck. Yeah. If you have a bigger space to walk in, let your stride be natural. If you have a smaller space, you might have to turn around here and there. But keep walking, and as you're walking, could you add the smallest bit of tension to your hands and your arms? A tiny degree of tension. Let them stiffen or brace a bit as you're walking. And just watch what that does to your neck and your chest as you create some tone or tension in your hands and your arms. Right? It might even affect the size of the pace or the size of your step. Might affect your breathing or your abdomen. Good. And then just let your arms rest again, simply hang and feel the arms and the hands as close to zero tension in them. Good. Okay. So now come to lie on your back. And so you can lie on a carpet, on a rug, yoga mat, whatever you have. So most of this lesson will take place on the back. And as you come to lie on your back, if you notice that your neck is tilted a little bit, your chin is really tilted far away from your sternum, then you probably will benefit from having just a little something underneath your head, like a really small folded towel that you could put back behind your head. Great. So take a moment to feel the way that you meet the floor. And if you're comfortable with it, have your legs long here to begin with. Your arms just down at your sides. Now, as you come down onto the floor, you'll experience, or the typical thing that most of us experience, is that the floor is incredibly stable. And as you come to lie on the floor, the surface of the floor provides support to a really large percentage of your body weight. And that feeling, that meeting between your body and the floor, is a moment of really being able to trust the stability of the surface that you're on. And there's something neurologically really important about just being in that moment with yourself and noticing that it's an opportunity to not only trust the floor, but also to trust your ability to sense the floor and to trust your ability to release your weight comfortably into its support. So notice the areas of the body that really clearly touch the floor, the places that feel like maybe there's more weight there. And then notice the areas that do not meet the floor. The space behind your neck. Maybe there's a little space around your wrist that doesn't meet the floor. For some people, the lower back does not feel like it's touching the floor. Maybe the space behind the knees or behind the ankles. Now, at any point during the lesson, you're free to change your position as you need or to rest whenever you want. And you'll hear me occasionally suggest that you stop and take a rest. But you are completely in charge of your experience. Awareness through movement is really a self-directed process. It might be led by a teacher, but it really is you directing the process. So go ahead and now bend your knees to stand your feet on the floor and then make yourself comfortable yet again in this position. Do whatever little changes or adjustments you might need. And have your arms comfortably on the floor, kind of at your side, resting with the floor. And you're going to very, very gently, and I'll say this again, what you're going to do requires you to move slower than you know how to do it. But you're going to lift your right arm just a little bit away from the floor, basically the way that it is. So your arm is more or less straight, and you're just going to gently, straight from the floor, lift the arm a little bit and then bring it back to the floor. So you lift the whole length of the arm just a little bit away from the floor. And you're not trying to prove something to yourself. You lift it. You don't need to leave it up there. You'll bring it back down to the floor. Feel how the floor gives it support, and then try that again. So you're not trying to perform this. You're actually really trying to watch the way your own attention blends with the means for the action. There are certain muscles that are required to contract to help lift the arm. So feel what that experience is like without any attachment to the way maybe it's supposed to be or any kind of external model. You're just tasting what this is like here at the beginning of the lesson to lift the whole length of the arm a little away from the floor. And see if you can start to listen to what happens right when you start to unweight your arm. How heavy or how light the arm feels, what kind of effort or tone do you feel in the arm? You can start to listen for any kind of timing between the movement of the arm itself and the movement of your shoulder blade or even your clavicle. Good. And then let your right arm come back to the floor. And very gently start to bend your right elbow so that your right hand moves in an arc and comes to rest somewhere on the right side of your chest, wherever it can comfortably rest on the right side of your chest. And hopefully here at the beginning, at least, you can do that and your elbow will stay on the floor. At some point, it will be necessary that you lift the elbow, but just bring the right hand to the chest so that it can touch the chest and then leave it there. Leave it resting on your body. And can you slowly bring your hand up so that it can touch somewhere near the base of your throat, up near the top of your sternum? And again, your elbow at this point may need to leave the floor, so do what you need to do. And just feel this top part of the sternum, right? So that it's right at the base of the throat. And feel on either side of the sternum. So you can move your finger pads a little left and a little right. Feel these little bony prominences on either side of the top of the sternum. Those are the two heads of the clavicle that I showed in the image. They might feel like little round spheres, the clavicular heads right there. And just take a moment to touch them exceedingly gently. Imagine the kind of touch you would use if a baby was sleeping and you wanted to just affectionately brush the baby's hair a little bit without waking the baby up. That's the quality of touch right now. So you're not seeking any kind of depth or pressure. You're beginning to value the simple sensitivity that's available here in your human hand and just enjoy touching around the clavicle. And come to the right clavicle, just to the right side, to the right of the sternum, and find that kind of circular, more prominent area that sticks out. And then keeping your fingers really soft, really curious, begin to slide the contact of your fingers a little bit to the right to trace along the shape of the clavicle. Now, this might require you to lift your elbow a little bit or to change what's happening at your wrist. And as you slide your fingers out towards the tip of the shoulder, and you can do this a number of times really gently, just notice how the clavicle is not really straight. It's not a straight arrow from your sternum to your shoulder, but maybe there are places where you can actually feel the curvature of it. Great. Everyone, could you bring your right hand back to the floor and slowly arc your left hand to the right clavicle so that your right finger pads, and for most people, I think exploring this bone with the opposite hand will probably feel easier. So start again at the clavicular head near the sternum and just in that really soft way, slide your hand down the clavicle or towards the shoulder. And so you're getting to know this surface that you're traversing. There's a top to the clavicle and there's a bottom to the clavicle, right? So the top is closer to your head and the bottom part is closer to your chest. Good. Now, could you find a way to kind of rest your left hand on that clavicle and see if you can make it easy for your left arm? So your left forearm could even be resting on your chest. And now bend your right elbow 90 degrees so that your right elbow stays on the floor and your forearm is vertical and your right hand can be really soft. And you're simply going to lift or unweight your right elbow a few times, ever so gently. So the purpose is not to prove that you can lift the elbow. It's really to find out something. It's to find out whether when you lift the right elbow, does the clavicle seem to move at all? Or does the clavicle brace where it is? Does it stiffen to some degree? You might even strategically brace the clavicle so that you can lift your elbow. Or is there a way of actually yielding a little bit, feeling like the project of lifting the elbow away from the ground might actually benefit from having a little softness around the clavicle? So you maybe have never encountered a moment where somebody asked you specifically to move your clavicle. You maybe have never even thought that that bone really moves much. But it is meant to move. And you're mostly looking for a really small movement. some nuance. Great. Now, could you take the right arm and bring it all the way towards the ceiling so it's vertical? Again, your right hand can be really soft, and you could just pause and sort of feel how the right arm can find a plumb line. So you're not having to effort to have the arm there. That's right. So your right upper arm bone is now off the floor. So your right arm is straight towards the ceiling. And keeping your left hand on the clavicle, so your left hand is listening, could you lift your right shoulder a little away from the floor so that your vertical right arm gets a little taller in your room? And then just bring that right shoulder back to the floor and just do that a few times very quietly. And there's really an absence of effort in both hands. Great. Okay, let your right arm come down. Let your left arm also come down. And go ahead and compare for a moment. Compare the way the right arm is represented in your self-image right now compared to your left arm. Yeah, you're welcome to lengthen your legs if you'd like. If you were going to make a drawing of yourself, would you have to use more ink for the right arm than for the left, or would the lines be darker on one side? If you were going to make a sculpture out of yourself, would the right arm somehow be heavier or softer, a different consistency than the left arm? And now go ahead and very gently lift the whole length of the right arm, just maybe an inch or so away from the floor, what we did at the very beginning, and then you set it down. And as you lift the whole right arm, see if you can imagine the movement of the clavicle. Can you sense it? Can you sense that maybe the clavicle actually moves? But it's almost more important to bring your imagination to it. So we're lifting the arm with the arm straight now. We did this. This was the very first thing we did when we laid down. You're just lifting the whole weight of the arm up, maybe an inch. Doesn't even have to be that much. And it is important that you bring your imagination into it so that you're not trying to get get a movement, get a movement right, or feel like you're failing to get a movement, but you're actually blending your attention and your imagination with the real sensory information that you just elicited from yourself. Okay, let that rest. And roll your head just a little side to side. Bend your knees and stand your feet. And now you're going to bring your attention to your left arm. And before you do anything with your left arm, it's important to say, okay, we're going to do this side. And you just had the experience with your right arm. And we're not going to map the same experience onto the left arm because your left arm is actually really different from your right arm. So that's what I'd like you to get interested in. Try not to rush with your attention. Oh, here's the next step we're doing. So just really be with your sensations. And so as you begin to just think of unweighting the whole length of your left arm a little bit away from the floor. But as you do it on this side, we're going to explore something. Refuse to force the arm. Instead, use a little tricky, cunning strategy, which is that you actually use an insufficient amount of effort to lift the left arm from the floor. You use less effort than you actually need to lift the left arm, which means the left arm won't leave the floor. Try to use less effort than you need, because in using less effort than you need, this really interesting phenomenon occurs, which is you get to feel all the little muscular precursors, all these little things that come online before you actually perform the full movement of lifting the bones from the ground. So it can be really useful to experience those muscular precursors, how they turn on, the timing, the intensity, and just watch how you interpret what is necessary to gently lift the left arm. Yeah, and then of course you can start to generate enough muscular tone to actually lift the left arm from the floor and just do it smoothly. Notice what you're paying attention to and whether you're aware of any movement in your left clavicle. Or maybe you notice that you brace or stiffen the neck or something like this. So, a positive experience of feeling something really fluid and wonderful in the body is just as valuable as a negative experience of being able to feel, oh, I kind of stiffen. It doesn't feel so great, right? That's really valuable too, to be able to feel that. Great. And then lower the arm back down and very gently begin to bend the left elbow so that your left hand approaches some part of the upper chest. And first, just notice where it comes into contact. And if you were to slide that hand to the clavicle, what's the easiest place on the clavicle that your left hand could find? Notice when you need to lift the left elbow or do something different with your wrist. And then gradually slide your hand along the breastbone, along the clavicle, the collarbone. You can go towards the sternum and find the clavicular head, right? Just to the left of the top of the sternum. And if you feel that clavicular head, asking just some basic questions. Is it bigger or smaller than the right side? Is it a little farther down my chest, closer to my throat? So you're just orienting yourself to this side. And then tracing with your fingers towards the shoulder. Feeling the curvature of that bone. And then take a moment and bring this left hand down and arc your right hand to the left clavicle and just start that same exploration but with your right hand. And could you slide your right hand to that outer tip of the clavicle near your shoulder and just let it be there. Keep your right hand touching the outer tip of the clavicle and take a few moments and raise just the left shoulder away from the floor and then bring it back down. So you leave your left elbow on the floor. You just lift your left shoulder a little bit and then let it come back down. And notice how easy it is to tell that the outer tip of the clavicle is moving with the shoulder blade. And keep this touch of your hand to the outer corner of the clavicle. And now slide your shoulder, left shoulder, a little bit upward towards your ear. So it'll slide with the friction of the floor. It's not a large movement, just a really clear movement. And then slide it down away from the ear. And just do this a few times. And again, imagine the change in the angle of your collarbone, the way that the collarbone is angling with the sternum, how that changes when you slide the shoulder up towards the ear and down. Great. And then setting or sliding that shoulder back down. Now bend your left elbow so that your left forearm is vertical and your left hand is very soft. And you can shift now where your right hand is on your clavicle. You can kind of explore. Remember, your right hand is the listening hand. And a few times lift the left elbow, just start to unweight it, and then bring the left elbow back to the floor. Very simple. So the movement of your left arm is in service of helping you feel some of these details. Good. Could you start to take that left arm all the way up towards the ceiling until it's straight? Do you stiffen the clavicle to do that? Do you allow for some movement? And then gently lift your left shoulder here so that your straight left arm goes a little bit taller in your room. And then you bring the left shoulder back to the floor. Trying that a few times. And as you do this, start to be curious about what's happening with your head. Right? The clavicle is actually quite close to the head, right? Of course, we have a neck in between there. Great. And then rest and bring both arms down to the floor. Both arms can unfold. And again, take a moment to appreciate what has changed in the image of yourself, the image of your arms relative to the rest of your body, and lengthen your legs if that would feel nice. Has there been a little shift in the proportions or the density or weight of the left arm and its contact with the floor? Great. Bend your knees again, stand your feet, and roll your head just a little bit left and right again. And as you do that, allow yourself to observe how the clavicles live while you roll your head. Maybe they don't do anything. Maybe they're just hanging out there as your head moves relative to the clavicles. Or maybe you're becoming aware of a tiny nuance, little glide or turn or shift in the clavicles, in that space where you roll your head one side and the other. And could you let your knees sway a few inches right and left? And you can just notice if you chose to have your knees sway in the same direction your head's rolling or opposite, just staying with this really simple, light movement. Great. And then bring your head and your knees back to this neutral center place. And slowly arc your right hand to your left clavicle again. And find a way to actually hold the clavicle. So, probably holding it with your thumb and your forefinger with the right hand, holding somewhere on the top and the bottom of it. And you can play around with this. You don't have to squeeze it, but you really feel like you have contact of the two sides, the top and the bottom. And, be gentle with yourself. It's not like a firm grip you would need if you were holding a hammer to hammer in a nail. You are, you have a nice grip of it though. And then you're going to bring your left arm, your left hand gently across you. You could imagine like you're going to put deodorant into your right armpit. So as your right hand holds your left clavicle, you're going to move your left arm across like your left hand wants to go towards the armpit. And probably that left arm's going to go underneath the right arm. Yeah, think underneath the right arm, everyone. So your right elbow might need to lift a little bit. But yeah, be gentle with yourself and do it a few times. And do this movement of taking your left arm across and towards your right armpit. Do it slower than you know how to do it. Yeah, and of course, your left shoulder does have to come along. Your left shoulder might peel a little bit away from the floor in order for the left arm to comfortably reach and kind of lay over your low ribs or lay over your chest. Maybe there's a little bit of rolling of your upper back, maybe even a little rolling of your head. But the insight here is to find here at the beginning, when the left shoulder peels a little away from the ground, what happens with the clavicle? Does the clavicle move too? Because the outer tip of your clavicle is attached to your shoulder blade, like we saw in the image. So with your right hand, you can actually guide, encourage the left clavicle to move as your left arm crosses. That's right. Your head is allowed to roll, but it doesn't need to roll. But if it makes everything feel better, more relaxed to roll your head, then it may be a nice thing to roll your head. Good. Go ahead and place your left arm down on the floor, but keep holding the clavicle with your right hand. Now you're going to do something that's the same but different. You'll bring your left arm across your body in the same way, but you're trying to absolutely not allow the clavicle to move from where the right hand holds it. So the right hand is actually going to now act like a kind of restriction. You're keeping the clavicle in place while you reach your left arm across. And so you're really only interested in doing the amount of movement that does not involve the clavicle moving. And you'll notice you can still move your arm a decent amount, but maybe it will prevent that last 30 or 40 degrees of getting that left arm to reach across comfortably. Good. Now let the clavicle move. Reach the arm across and guide the clavicle. Help it, invite it. Guide it with your right hand so that you actually feel an articulation across the upper part of the chest with the left shoulder and rolling your ribs so everything starts to feel a little more integrated. That's it. And you can think, oh, I'm reaching to put deodorant into my right armpit, or you could actually reach through your left hand beyond that. Think of reaching your left hand into the space of your room that's to the right of you. Mm-hmm. And as you reach this left arm across, your left arm is reaching to the right. Could you let your head and your eyes roll to the right? Good. And as you reach your left arm across, what does it feel like to roll your head and your eyes to the left? So now the head and the eyes are actually doing the opposite of what your left arm, shoulder, chest are doing. Can you still invite the clavicle to slide, to move, to actually come a little forward with the lifting of the left shoulder? Great. Everybody come back to rest. Bring your arms down. Let your legs lengthen. You might measure a certain kind of expansiveness in your breathing, the way that the ribs on the left side move relative to the clavicle. This space between your clavicle and your ribs on your left side, and how the breath might be able to access that space. Great. Go ahead and bend your knees again. Stand your feet. And this time, gently reach the left arm across the chest to hold the right clavicle. So you can change this grip, right? If we're holding for a long time and your hand gets tired, take a rest and then maybe, oh, how could I hold the clavicle differently? So you're working with any kind of limitations you might have with your hand as well. But you're holding it substantially, right? And then slower than you know how to do it, you might hear me say that in this series a lot, start to bring your right arm across your chest gently and think of this kind of mundane activity of putting deodorant under your left armpit. So you bring your right arm across. It's as simple as that. Not performing the action quickly or suddenly, because what you're interested in is the world of the right clavicle. How does it articulate? Does it articulate at all? Does it move at an angle away from the floor? Right? You could feel that that outer tip of your right shoulder lifts away from the floor. And you may feel your ribs roll a little bit on the floor. So your sternum must roll or tilt a little bit. And if your clavicle runs between the top of your sternum and that outer shoulder tip, well, as you lift the right shoulder, does the clavicle kind of angle? Does the part of the clavicle that meets the sternum angle a little downward towards the floor? And continue to take this right arm, reaching it, crossing it. As you reach the right arm to the left, could you roll your head and your eyes to the right? So the opposite direction. Feel the clavicle moving one way and the head and some vertebrae of your neck and your eyes going the opposite way. You're not trying to force that. You're just interested in, how does this happen? How do I utilize the spaces that open and close as the right arm reaches across to the left and the head and the eyes move to the right? That's right. Good. And then switch. Let the head and the eyes go to the left. So you might feel a little bit more congruency. Everything's moving to the left. Good. The next time that your right hand reaches kind of into that left armpit space, could you leave it there and then relax your left hand? So your left arm will sort of be more on top of your right arm. Could you reach your left hand to the right now, towards the right, the space of your room to the right? Reach that a little to the right. And then reach your right hand to the left. And just go back and forth, a little side to side. Maybe your hands are touching your body, maybe they're in space, but the hands are really soft. And feel how this rolls you a little across your back. That's right. Some of you are finding that the pelvis is starting to roll a little bit. But do all of this with this perspective of your clavicles. The clavicles can float and shift That's right. And then just switch which arm is more on top. So most of us have the left arm closer to the head. Could you just find a way to little shift of that? And again, one arm reaches and then the other arm reaches. And not making it some big performative movement, but really that quiet softness that you can find in your chest. Great. And let the arms come down. Your legs can lengthen. And just notice this place right at the top of the sternum. See if there's, oh, could you roll your head a little bit first? Just roll your head really gently. And as you roll your head, see if there's any kind of really subtle lubrication or softness that's there at the top of your sternum. Right? This ability to make a connection between these different parts of the body is really a skill to notice the connection. Right? How is your arm connected to your head? And being able to feel how your arm is connected to your head, it's a useful skill, from anything from giving someone a hug to you're in a car and maybe looking for oncoming traffic and you turn over one shoulder. There's so many implications. We could list anything that you do with your arm and that you also do with your head. Great. Bend your knees again, stand your feet. And now lift both arms towards the ceiling. And slowly cross your arms so that you're going to bring your left hand to your right cheek. And then your right hand will come to your left cheek. That's right. So your forearms will be crossed, your elbows will kind of be up in the air. The elbows are relatively pointed towards the ceiling. And you could just explore a little bit with your left hand, sort of maybe around the ear, behind the ear, the side of the neck. Yeah, and then see if your left hand can find your right clavicle. And you're going to take your left hand and just gently traverse it from the outer tip towards the outer tip of the left shoulder. So from that clavicular head out towards the outer tip of the left shoulder, the place where the arm and the shoulder blade meet. You'll feel some bony landmarks there. And then with your left hand, simply trace, not the clavicle, but the top of your shoulder blade. So you can kind of bring your hand more to the top of the shoulder, a little behind the shoulder, and see if you can find what might be shoulder blade. Finding your way across the top of that left shoulder blade. It'll come into some big tissue. It might be tight, tight tissue at the base of your neck on the right side. And so you can just touch there at the corner, the base of your neck on the right side, and then you can go back out towards the tip of the shoulder as the left hand moves like this. And interestingly, your left clavicle has to move as your left hand is exploring. Good. And then just slowly take your arms back up towards the ceiling. And you're going to switch which arm came in first. You're going to bring your right hand to your neck or kind of behind the ear, at your cheek, something like that. And then your left hand goes over, left forearm goes over the top of the right forearm so that your left hand can be at your cheek, your ear, your neck. And your right hand's going to slide down and find your left clavicle and explore from that clavicular head out towards the tip of the shoulder. And then the right hand can explore the top of the shoulder blade. So that area a little back behind you, more on your back, going all the way back towards the neck where you might feel this sort of thicker, sometimes tight area at the base of the neck. Yeah, good. And now you're going to do this with both hands at the same time. So you can still have this kind of cross. Could both hands find the outer tips of the shoulders? That's right. And then gently glide the hands towards the neck, towards the sides of the neck. Glide the hands up the neck, right? You have hands on opposite sides of your neck. Glide the hands up the cheeks, up towards the temple, over the top of the head. Your hands are going to have to slide one on top of the other, back down the sides of your head. So you'll come into contact with the ears. And all the way down, maybe the right hand can find the right clavicle, the left hand can find the left clavicle. That's right. And all the way down back to the floor. So maybe that's something you do in the shower, something like that. So slowly lift both hands, cross your forearms, let your two hands find the sides of your neck, opposite sides. And just one more time, slide your hands up the sides of your face. All the way over the top of your head. One hand will have to kind of slide over the other, down the sides of the face, to the clavicles, and back down to the floor. And then rest. You can rest with your legs long or feet still standing. And just think about the space directly behind the clavicle, in front of the upper ribs that lie behind it, this space between the clavicle and those ribs. And just breathe a few times so that some of the air that you take in expands this space really pleasantly for yourself. It doesn't expand it perfectly. You just come into maybe imagining that space there, imagining that space widening, opening up, some buoyancy there. Good. And whatever quality you're enjoying, could you roll your head the smallest amount without losing this kind of peaceful quality? And you roll your head and maintain some awareness of that way that you can breathe into the spaces behind your clavicles. And then you're going to bend your knees, and you could imagine how you could roll to your side and come up to sit and stand. You know, your body will change orientation with gravity several times. So I encourage you to really enjoy the sensations that come with this change in orientation of gravity, that sensation and how things change with your clavicles and your shoulder. So as you begin to roll to one side, just keep enjoying that moment. Feel how gravity passes through you. If you're on your side, it passes through you a little differently. And you can put one hand on the floor to help you sit up. And, once you sit up, there's this new sense of coming into the vertical, coming maybe into sitting. Your clavicles experience yet another form, another relationship with gravity. And then you can just really slowly come up to stand. So when you're ready, you can rise into standing. And when you come up to stand, don't do anything. Just stand and become quiet again. Feel the quality of release of your arms. Feel what kind of space is there now for your neck, for your head, what kind of space is there for your armpits. Notice what's there when you breathe. And then just shift your weight a little bit left, right, maybe a little forward and back. And see as you shift your weight across your feet a little bit, if you could still have whatever some kind of quality of space up in your chest that you started to find, can you feel that supported from underneath? That's right. And then start to walk, just gently walk around and continue to observe this quality as you walk. So the next time you're going to practice this might be in the shower or when you wash your body, your arms move around your head and your shoulders and all you need to think about is, oh, I have clavicles. That's right. I wonder if I can feel my clavicles now. Right. Any movement of the arms, you're putting away the dishes. Those movements require the clavicles to move. Great. Okay, so thanks everyone. That's the end of the lesson. I always keep these meetings up for some conversation at the end. So if you want to really stay in your whatever space you've landed in here after the lesson and you don't want to have your eyes towards the screen, then of course you're welcome to sign off. So thank you. Um, so we'll just let people filter out as they would like to, and then we'll take a little time for some questions and conversation.
Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome.
Bye.
All right. So sharing can be really generative. So you might have a question and you think, oh, stupid question, or even just a sensation that came up. Um, it can just be really helpful for others. So I encourage you to share if you want to, but you can also just listen. Does anybody have any thoughts, questions, sensations? Yeah, Sarah. Oh, everybody's muted, so I'll ask you to unmute.
Sorry. Thank you. Yeah, well, it's so nice to see you again. I know I haven't talked to you since you were in Cambridge, but I've been doing your Feldenkrais classes and really enjoying them. And I think it's just like I've had a line of pain up the right side of my body, and it's of course not, a bone chain that connects, but all this fascia and memory and holding patterns that actually your classes of just like this kind of thing wasn't like fast yoga or all the other things I were doing. I wasn't slowing down enough to notice how I keep sort of re-injuring things. So it's just really interesting to notice like how hard it is to relax the right side. And then I can feel like I can get the left side relaxed really quickly, but there's really deep tension there. And sometimes I try to massage it really hard. But what I've learned from this is that I actually, by touching it, I can sense it and then relax underneath it, which is amazing.
Yeah, that's great. And it's really relative to how we're exploring in this series, and that just that softness can help you feel the details that are really important to be able to feel, right? When we're really in a high tone situation, our tissue is contracted and it doesn't know how to let go. It's actually hard for us to feel details right? Because there's so much noise. There's just so much. Does that make sense, everyone? Like there's just so much sensation, and that's kind of all we can feel is that like clenching. And so I think that this kind of process can be really helpful to see if you can quiet down that noise a little bit and listen to some of those details. Yeah. Yeah, Jill.
Sarah, I could feel my clavicle really clearly towards the sternum and right across to my shoulder. I just wondered, oh, so when I get into the shoulder area, I've really got no idea where my clavicle ends. Um, is it possible to have more clarity about that shoulder, that sort of general area of the coming together of the or of the coming together in space of various bones near the shoulder?
So I think it is, but it really kind of depends on what it is that you might be feeling, right? So there's a lot going on right there, right? Because the three bones meet, the humerus bone, the clavicle, and the scapula. And then there's all these crossings of all the soft tissue, places where muscles attach, places where muscles cross one bone, don't attach to that bone, but attach to the other bone, right? And a lot of that tissue, because there's tendon and ligament there, tendon and ligament is really strong tissue. And so it almost feels like bone, right? So, one way to decipher would be to give a little bit more pressure. And if there's a tenderness, then you probably know it's not bone. But again, there's so many things that are crossing over there that it is a really tricky area. Becoming more clear about where your scapula is and about where your humerus is might be helpful. And maybe on Wednesday, if you're here, Jill, we'll take a better look at that outer part of the clavicle because imaging it can always be helpful too with that when there's like an area of the body that's just not clear for us. Like, what is that? But I also encourage you to be okay with the not knowing, like that space of, I can't tell. What is this? Is this my arm? Oh, okay, no, I know it's not my arm. Is this my shoulder blade? Nope, I know it's not my shoulder blade. I don't know. Is it my clavicle or is it something else? And the only other thing it would be then would be, some kind of soft tissue. Yeah, it's a great question because I'm sure others were feeling the same way.
Sarah, beautifully taught lesson. I always love, you know, listening to you when there are new people as well. Just really beautiful. Loved the space behind the clavicles was breathing into that was quite new for me. And in standing, it just allowed my scapulae to kind of, without me doing anything, just they were like slipped down at the back in a lovely way. And I was also thinking about having read that birds don't just have lungs, they have like, I think it's like something like 9 air sacs in them, which is why they're so light. But I felt like I had bird air sacs like up here. Just really
Oh, I
cool
love that.
sensation, that space behind the clavicles. Thank you.
Yeah, great. That's a beautiful image, Erin. Thank you for that. Good. Any other thought? Okay, thanks everyone.
Thank you.